Well, it's another podcast. Just called Picking It Out. It's another podcast, y'all. Just called Picking It Out. We got Mr. Walt Willey in the house. And we're gonna be picking it out. All right, y'all. Well, this is a very, very special day right here. It's been 50 years since Hank Williams Jr. fell off of Ajax Mountain and basically became what everybody knows him as nowadays. And it was kind of a rebirth, and he's described it as being born again on that day. For those of you that don't know, he fell 530 feet off of Ajax Peak on the Montana-Idaho border, August the 8th, 1975. And he was with a good friend of his, Dick Willey, and Dick's 11-year-old son at the time, Walt Willey. And it was just the three of them. And we are very, very honored today to be talking with Mr. Walt Willey to celebrate this 50th anniversary celebration, whatever you want to call it, of Mr. Randall Hank Williams Jr. So, Walt, how you doing, man?
Doing real well. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, man, thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. You mentioned it's kind of a celebration, and it is and it isn't. You know, there's a lot of memories of that day. Hard to imagine it was 50 years ago, but a lot of memories I still think about day to day in my life, and some of them are good memories. You know, about you mentioned the rebirth of Hank and where he is today, and what he kind of did for himself and how he worked his way out of the situation. But there was a lot of pain and suffering along the way with the healing and what he went through, because it's been a long 50 years to recover from that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. I've had a few health issues myself in the last couple of years, but other than that, I'm doing good and doing well up here in Montana. I'm actually in Montana right now for the summertime, and it's a beautiful place. So I'm doing good. Today's a good day.
And, you know, you and I have already talked about this, but how is your dad doing?
You know, doing okay. My dad's a little older now. He's 84 now. We have him down in an assisted living center in St. George, Utah. He's pretty much in there all the time now. He's got some dementia, and it's kind of taken over, which is a sad deal. Was very, very active and up to this point, and just in the last year and a half, the old dementia is kind of starting to eat him up now, and so it's kind of sad to see how he's been and the lifestyle he's lived, and now all of a sudden he can't do much, can't remember much, and in fact he only remembers my name about half the time. So it's kind of sad to see your parents suffer as they do, but it's part of life, I think. And like I say, it's just something you have to deal with. We'll all go through something like this and go through loss of friends and family in life. And I tell my wife, the older we get, the more friends and family we're going to lose, unfortunately, but it is just how it is, just what it is.
Yeah, it is. Bobby Bear told me something one time that I have never forgot. And we were at his house. We were writing a couple of songs, and he was just kind of sitting there after we got done, and he said, "It's a hell of a feeling when you realize that you are the oldest person that you know."
That's true. That's a true story there. Yep,
I
and it
just,
can happen, can it?
yeah, I just
we
thought,
we talk,
man, that's
we me and my wife, we've been married coming up on 35 years, and we talk about it now with my cancer that I'm fighting, that there'll be a day that one of us will outlive the other person, and it's sad to think. And so yeah, it's just unless you both go down in a flaming fire on an airplane together, one person, one spouse is going to outlive the other and be alone for a few years. And so it is hard to, like I say, they call it the golden years when you get older, like me. But I don't know sometimes if there's a lot of gold in there or not.
yeah. I like Rodney Dangerfield's take on the golden years.
Yeah.
He had some good jokes he wrote about the golden years.
Yeah,
And
knowing Rodney, he probably had a whole book of them.
yeah, those one-liners, man. There wasn't nobody like him with those one-liners.
Oh, I know it.
How did your dad and Hank initially meet? And
I
when
was
was that?
6 years old, 6 year old at the time, and my grandfather on my mom's side, he knew some guys in Nashville that owned a gun store, and he got in touch with my grandpa and said, "Hey, Hank Jr. is going to be out in Butte, Montana. He's got a concert out there, and I'd like you to meet Hank. Hank's into Montana and hunting and fishing. Could you just show him around a little bit?" And so Hank at the time, his show there in Butte, I think so I was 6, and so that kind of dates me here. Hank would have been, let's see, what's that make it? He's 15 years older than me, so it would have made him about 21 years old, I guess, when he had that show in Butte. And so we went over and watched him as a family, my mom and dad and my sister and I, and saw him in a show, just a little civic center there in Butte. And Hank at the time was young, and like you had mentioned there, he started off just kind of doing his own, doing a lot of remakes of his dad's songs. He was taught to be another Hank Senior. Sing like him, be like Hank Senior, act like him, and it added a lot of pressure on Hank's shoulders because he wanted to go out and do his own thing. And so, he sang a lot of Hank Senior songs at that initial show, but he did a lot of his own stuff. And at first, I'm not sure if the fans wanted that. They wanted to hear his dad's stuff. And so it was a little tough for a while. And it took a lot of time for people to start accepting Hank for who he is and him as a songwriter and him as an entertainer. It took some time.
Oh yeah, I mean that's all from the time he was born. That was pretty much what Audrey she wanted to make him another Hank Williams.
Absolutely. She made him dress like him, act like him. Yeah, it was just mold him into that little mold, wear the cowboy hat and everything, and go out. I've seen him clips on the old Ed Sullivan show, and a little bitty kid out there on stage trying to perform Hank Senior songs. That puts a lot of pressure on an 8-year-old kid on stage, trying to go after one of the greatest country music guys in history of Hank Senior. So it's kind of hard to follow in those footsteps, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, it'd be hard for anybody.
Yeah.
I think around 21 years old is about the time that he first decided he wasn't going to use the old band anymore, and he was going to kind of
do his own thing.
Do his own thing.
And so to kind of go back in time here, he came out to our ranch in the Big Hole Valley there, and my dad just drove him around the ranch, showed him moose and elk and bear and deer, and we have basically a sanctuary up there in western Montana, a beautiful, beautiful ranch, and Hank fell in love with it, and kind of from there on forward, my dad and Hank became best of friends, and later on, he asked my dad to be his best man at one of his weddings. I think Hank was married about 3 times, and I think his third marriage with Mary Jane, Hank actually asked my dad to be his best man. So that was a fun event for my dad to be a part of and be honored to be called to do that. And so Hank was actually 26 years old. This was about 5 years later that Hank came out on a summer day, and August 8th, 1975, and we went. I know a lot of the stories and the TV things that we've done over the years. a lot of the misrepresentation where we're hunting, and we weren't actually hunting sheep. We were just looking at sheep and mountain goat up in there because the hunting season wasn't even going on there in mid-August. And so we were just looking. There's a lot of bighorn sheep and mountain goat up in that area. And so we were just looking at game and enjoying the scenery and just talking about getting back home and doing some fishing when we got back. It was about a 2 or 3 hour drive one way up into this country where Ajax Mountain is. And so, yeah, we were just out kind of for a daily afternoon hike, basically up in the mountains, and we could look over in the Salmon, Idaho from the Idaho side and look down into the Big Hole Valley, the Montana side to our right. And so we're on a big ridge top at about 9,000 feet, and beautiful country. You could see forever. You could see way over in the eastern or western Idaho mountain range of the Sawtooth, and you could look to the east and see the Pintler Wilderness off to the Beaverhead County Pioneer Mountains to our east. And so, yeah, a nice inspiration point for us to have lunch, and Hank actually talked to us about the new album he just released, Hank Williams Jr. and Friends. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you know about kind of, not one of his first albums. He did numerous, but that was one of his first ones that he did because he did all the music on it. And that was his own deal. And so he actually sang up on top of that mountain. He sang the Montana song, which was a bit of bitter irony when he sat there, just the three of us singing the Montana song. I don't know if you've ever heard the words. But,
I have. I've got that record.
Yeah. It was neat thing to sit there and listen to him sing that story before all hell broke loose with his fall.
And he was basically what you're talking about, Hank Williams Jr. and Friends. He had moved to Alabama in 1974.
That's correct.
And he did that record in Muscle Shoals, and he came out there with y'all in 75 just to celebrate it and just kind of get away. And,
Exactly. Yeah, it was kind of a good chance for him to get away. He felt good about the album and the direction it was going and being promoted. And he thought, this is my big moment. I most of it was kind of his stuff and his approval, and it just kind of fit the mold of what he was trying to accomplish in his career, I think, when he kind of dropped that album. So
yeah. And y'all were up about 9,000 elevation, you said?
Yeah, that's about what we were. Ajax Peak goes up to 10,300. The air's pretty thin up there. You're above tree line, so not a lot of tree, and it's just rock and snow, and you're way above. There's not as much oxygen, so the trees and plant life can't grow up in that country. It's just too high of elevation, and the growing season's so short up there as well. You get 2 seasons there, spring and winter, and so it's at that elevation. And so anyway, we were kind of done for the afternoon, and we decided that we needed to head back down. It was a good hour and a half hike off the ledge of the mountain there. We went up and came down a different route than we went up, and we thought we could speed up the time by going down through this chute and get on this big snowfield and then get around Ajax Lake. Our old Jeep was parked at the foot of the lake, and we could drive on home and be back at the house by 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, in time for dinner, and maybe go out and do some fishing yet before the sun went down. And so we were coming down a snow chute, and of course at that elevation the snow is in there year round. It never does melt. It's really hard packed snow. It's almost ice, almost like a glacier, but it is still snow. And it's really steep terrain, very, very steep. And I kind of went across the snow field first to get across it and over to some rock. And then I was the lightest, the littlest one, and I got by okay. And then my dad, he followed in my footsteps because we didn't want to break through and go sliding down the mountain. And so we were waiting on Hank the other side. And we said, all right, Hank, just follow in our footsteps. And so Hank was kind of coming across and slipped in the snow on one of our, it kind of gave way. And Hank literally took off like a toboggan, sliding on his belly down the snowfield. And it wasn't the fall down the snowfield that did the damage. The snowfield eventually ran out into some massive boulders. And so by the time he was at the end of the snowfield, a few hundred feet down there on that incline, he was clipping along pretty good. and
Yeah.
his feet hit the big boulders on the end of the snowfield first, and it flipped him up in the air, and then he just tumbled down the mountain and rocks. He was like a rag doll just tumbling down the rock, and you could hear his face and his body just crack and smash every like a cartwheel he would do. It was sickening to watch. I can still remember the look on his face when he looked back up at me when he was sliding down the mountain on his belly. And I think at that first instant, he knew he was in trouble. He tried to stand up. He couldn't. It was too hard of snowfield, and just he was going too fast to slow himself down. And he saw those rocks coming up, and he knew it was going to be trouble when he hit him. And sure enough, it was. So, yeah, it was a horrible thing.
It's amazing to me because in his autobiography that he did in the early 80s, I know they did the TV movie and everything too, but
living proof.
Living proof. He had remembered all this.
Sure. There's a couple of chapters just on the fall. It's a great, Michael Bain, I think he was editor of one of those guys at Country Music Magazine, came out, went up to Ajax, did the article, or he'd sit around in our cabin there and wrote part of those chapters. And it was really depictive of exactly how it went. He did a very good job on that book, especially during the fall and what he described. And it was, he did a very nice job on it. And I remember Hank just smashing through the rocks down there, and he finally got stopped, and he was just holding his face. And when he looked up at us, he was a long way away. We knew he was hurt bad because he was putting his hands over his face, and his head was solid blood. It looked like it had been ripped off. It was a very disgusting thing. And so my dad, he was able to kind of ski down the snowfield, and he got to Hank first. Me being a little kid, it took me a while to work myself down to where my dad and Hank were, kind of waiting for me to get down. And Hank was moaning and groaning with the pain. And at that point, we had a big decision to make: who was going to go for help and who was going to stay and try to talk to Hank and not let him go to sleep and keep him alive. And so that's where I kind of came in. I was too little to drive and get the truck out of there. And it's a good thing my dad kind of went for help, because I could never have gotten our old Jeep turned around on that mountain road. And even though I was still driving, don't tell anybody, but I was driving a little kid. I was growing up on a Montana ranch, but I still knew how to drive pretty well. But I'm glad my dad went for help. And he basically told me, Walt, just don't let him go to sleep. Just keep talking to him. And I remember crying, as just bawling, just seeing my dad disappear off that mountain and go for help. I was stuck on that mountain with Hank, and he was moaning and groaning, and I just sat there and blabbed about everything known to man, from football stories to fishing and hunting and coon dogs, and that's all I could do for literally 4 solid hours. Was just and Hank did motion to me one time to go over to the snowfield. His face was really sore, and he wanted some snow to put on the face. It was the numbness was starting to come back, and I gave him a wad of snow in my hand, and he reached up and grabbed it from me. And that's the first time I saw his face. And his nose was literally hanging off by a piece of skin and meat. And I thought, oh my goodness, what in the world's going on here? And, the blood was all over the rocks, and his leg was hurting him. I think he hurt his knee bad. He broke some ribs, but it was mainly head trauma. His forehead was blown apart. His brain was exposed for like 6 hours. And my dad had taken off his shirt and kind of wrapped up what was left in Hank's face, basically, and tied everything what was left behind his head, laid him uphill so he wouldn't drown in his own blood, and went for help. So, and I was stuck on that rotten mountain with Hank for 4 hours. So I was the lucky one, I guess.
And 11 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine, for a grown man, for your daddy even. But I cannot imagine for an 11-year-old
boy. It was
boy.
a lot of trauma, I could say. I think you're just numb in the spot, and put you in situations throughout your life, and just yeah, you don't have a choice. You don't really have a choice. You're given a situation, and you need to learn how to react to it, or life is gonna eat you up. And I think it prepares you to face a lot of adversity in life. Whether it's fighting cancer yourself or something, like we've talked earlier, it does help you out, I think, in life. Those things.
I was going to mention that too. You going through that at such an early age, maybe God chose you to put you there to save him, because you saved him, man.
I kind of did. I think
you kept him from
my dad
going.
Helped. My dad helped. Helicopter crew helped. The good Lord up above really put in some help, because there's no way he should have ever made it off that mountain in the condition he was in. It's kind of interesting. My dad, on the way out to our house, he actually passed on the way to our house, almost to our place. 2.5 hours later, a guy in a Forest Service vehicle, and he knew he probably had a two-way radio. And back in those days, no one knew what a cell phone was. And so my dad whipped the Huey and chased him down, and he was able to radio to the little local Forest Service station in Wisdom, Montana, a little tiny town in the Big Hole Valley, that there was an injury on Ajax Mountain, and to call a helicopter out of Missoula, which was 90 air miles away, that we needed help to get somebody off the mountain. They didn't say who it was, or what. And so the Forest Service guy and my dad whipped around, and they came back up to Ajax, parked up at the bottom of the lake, and walked back up there. And like I say, it took about 4 hours round trip for my dad to get back up there. When he returned, he did have the Forest Service guy with us. He thought he could be us some assistance, and so while we were waiting for the helicopter to come, me and the Forest Service guy walked over along the side of the mountain to kind of a flat spot and picked out a big flat area in the rock that we knew that the helicopter pilot could set down. We knew we'd have to still traverse him about a half a mile on a stretcher across that mountain to get him to the helicopter. And he thought, Hank's a big guy. And we thought, is this the three of us, me, my dad, and the Forest Service guy? How can three of us get Hank in a stretcher across the side of this mountain? Because we don't want to take off down the snowfield either, and us be another victim of Ajax Mountain. And so it was kind of interesting when it was starting to get a little late in the afternoon, and the sun had gone over on the back side of the mountain and starting to set on the east side of the Ajax. So it was starting to get fairly cold, even though it was an August 8th day. I think it was August 8th. Was that his fall?
Yeah.
Andrew? Yeah. And so even though it was summertime up there, it was at that elevation, it gets cool pretty early. And so the rocks were still warm in the heat of the day from the sun beating on the rock. So we made a little shelter around Hank so we wouldn't go into shock. And he was just shivering at that point, really getting cold. And we thought, we got to get him warmed up. So we basically piled rocks around Hank to kind of generate some heat off of them rocks to help him a little bit. We didn't have blankets or nothing, and we weren't prepared for that type of injury. And so it was starting to it was about 5:30 or 6, and we heard the helicopter come, and a bad situation. It's really big mountainous country where he was at. A lot of valleys and rivers and lakes, and of course no GPS coordinates. He couldn't find it, so he was just trying to find. He knew it was up on Ajax Mountain, but the helicopter pilot hadn't a clue which valley we were in. So we would see that helicopter fly over the top of the valley, and we'd wave. And in the meantime, me and the Forest Service guy had gone over, and we made a big X with toilet paper so he could see this big X in the rock, and that's how we marked the spot for him to set it down. And we'd hear that helicopter go over into some like canyons, and you'd hear the old wallop of those blades in that helicopter echoing off those mountains. And we thought, oh no, he didn't see us. And pretty soon he'd come back again, and we'd wave and yell. He couldn't see us down there. And finally, about the third or fourth trip, he did finally see that big X. And it was a blessing, because he was starting to run out of daylight, and the helicopter pilot thought, I'm going to run out of daylight, and we're going to leave Hank on the mountain for the night, and we're not going to get him out of here. And so the good Lord was watching over the helicopter pilot as well. and on board was a EMT guy, and so he was able to set the helicopter down. And the EMT guy came over to the side of the mountain, and so he helped us get Hank across on that stretcher. He brought a stretcher over, and it was like the old MASH helicopters. It has the big glass cockpit, and they actually had to strap Hank on the outside of the helicopter. And it was about a 20-minute flight to the Little Wisdom Airport from the mountain. And Hank says he remembers looking over the outside, and he's freezing to death on that helicopter outside of the chopper, and looking down on the Big Hole Valley. And they set it down at the Wisdom Airport. And there's a twin-engine airplane waiting for him at that point. And then they flew Hank up to Missoula in the airplane, and then another helicopter ride from the Missoula airport to Community Hospital in Missoula. So all in all, from the time Hank fell to the time he arrived at the hospital, I mean, it was pitch dark and 9 o'clock at night. It was a long day for Hank. And so my dad and I got off the mountain. We were in shock of what just happened. We had to drive back home. We got home in the dark, and there's a bunch of people waiting for us at our house when we arrived at our little cabin there at the ranch. And a lot of neighbors had heard through the grapevine that there was an injury on the mountain. They didn't know if it was me or my dad. And because they thought if it was me, Hank and Dad could have got me off of there. So they knew it probably wasn't me, but they didn't know if it was my dad or Hank. And then they found out it was Hank. And so my dad and we got in the car and we drove to Missoula. Dad wanted to be up there to see how Hank was doing. And Hank was in surgery, I believe, 12 or 14 hours the first night. They got 3, thank goodness it was a weekend, and there was 3 specialists that were still on call. There was a neurosurgeon, there was a orthopedic, and there was a ear, nose, and throat guy. And they were still on staff, and they were really top-notch surgeons. And I'm glad, because they really saved his life as well, because if he hadn't had the luck of those surgeons being on staff at that night, I don't know, Hank probably wouldn't have made it through the night. And so, it was a pretty eventful day, that August 8th.
Can I just say, the Boy Scouts don't have shit on y'all. My God.
Making an X. A serious event.
Making an X with toilet paper. I mean,
making an X with toilet paper and hauling a broken body across the mountain. Yeah, we were pretty lucky. Like I say, there's a lot of us that were on board to save Hank's life that day. It wasn't just me or my dad. There's a lot of people that participated in that. So anyway, that's nice for you to say.
I mean it. I mean, people these days, they wouldn't know how to, they wouldn't know.
Well, you just got to react. You just got to learn to react. And some decisions you make right, and you look like a genius, and some maybe you don't react good, and then you look like an idiot. So I don't know. We were able to draw the right straws and the right cards at that time. Now, in hindsight, we could say we probably made some right decisions. So
yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. So we got back up to the hospital that night, and then during his recovery, he was in the hospital good 2 or 3 weeks. Back in those days, they wouldn't let little kids in hospitals. There was a rule that you had to be over 16 or 21. They didn't want people to come in and little kids and have a cold or something. And so, but Hank really wanted to see me for some reason. I get really emotional at this one. Sorry about that.
It's all right, man. Just take your time.
But he really wanted to see me. And Hank's head was swollen up like a watermelon. My dad warned me that Hank doesn't look the same, and not to be fearful, if I saw him. And so I walked in, and he didn't look like the guy that I saw just a few days before in the mountain being saved. The Montana song. But we made it through. And Hank wrote me a letter. There with one eye. And he said, "Walt, thanks for saving me, Hank Williams Jr." And I still have that letter. in my gun safe, and I'll save that letter forever because it's worth $1 million to me. So anyway, that's when the first time I saw him, and he had a long road, long recovery. After that, Johnny Cash and June Carter came out and saw him, got to meet them. A lot of other entertainers. They were doing a lot of interviews with my dad and People Magazine. They wanted us to go on the Johnny Carson show, and my mom at that point said, we're not going to put Walt through any more than he already has to. And so we turned down the Johnny Carson interview. And we just wanted to get our lives back to normal because it got crazy there for a while with Hank. And we had a place up on Flathead Lake in northwestern Montana. And Hank chose to recover for 2-3 months afterwards because my dad had the running back and forth to the doctors twice a week just for checkups. And then he had numerous other surgeries. But so Hank actually rehabbed at our place for another 3 months at our house on Flathead Lake. And my sister and I would play ping pong with him for hours after school. And Hank needed to get his one eye focused again because one eye was blown apart and had to get that vision back. His nose was all stuffed with gauze, and Hank remembers the first time he was able to smell. My dad took him down to Missoula to get that packing removed, and Hank walked out of the doctor office that day, and Hank said, "Is somebody mowing the lawn around here?" And my dad said, "Well, yeah, they're doing some lawn mowing over here on the side of the hospital." And that was the first time Hank could smell in over 3 months when they removed that gauze. And so, anyway, so. He'd get a lot of fan mail. My mom would have to go to the local little post office and get bags of letters and mail and come and dump them on his bed at our place on Flathead Lake there. And he'd go through the mail and he'd read every card that he was sent. And people would send him preserves and fishing hooks. You name it. He got it as a get Will gift. It was pretty funny. He'd get brownies and butternut fudge. it was kind of funny the stuff he'd get. But it was pretty neat, and he had a great. It reached all the country music world about the fall and the Nashville Times and all that back east there. And of course, being from Tennessee and Alabama at the time, Hank had a huge following in the Deep South, not only from his upbringing with Hank Sr., but even now. I mean, he's still 76 years old and still is out touring. I mean, he's got a great following still at his age and does a great show. I don't know how he has the energy to still get up and still work like he does, because he still does a lot of shows for his age. Pretty amazing. So.
Wow. Man. Yeah, I can only imagine how that felt for you. It amazes me that he remembered enough to want to see you and to give you with one eye, like you said, because
with one eye, he wrote that letter.
The left eye was hanging out of his eye socket, basically, right?
Well, and his mouth was blown apart, his teeth, lips. He broke, they said, every bone in his head except the roof of his mouth. That's the only bone he didn't break. And so the head trauma, brain injury was just, his skull was fractured beyond. And they think the only way he didn't suffer any bacteria in his brain, because the forehead was blown apart and part of his brain was actually coming out of his skull, is that at that elevation, it was so cold, there wasn't a lot of germs and bacteria. And that's probably the thing that kept him. That was their biggest fear, was if he was going to get infection after the trauma he'd been through. And they knew if he got through that initial 10 days or 2 weeks, he'd have a good shot. So it was, at the hospital, it was pretty nick and tuck, if he was going to make it or not. He wasn't out of the woodworks yet, let's put it that way. And so his mom, Audrey, flew into town. Aunt Loretta came into town, pretty much stayed there in Missoula at the hotel while he was going through all this trauma. And so there's a lot of family members that came in, to see him and be a part of it. So he had a good support system with him surrounding his manager. I think that was J.R. Smith.
It was.
And Merle Kilgore. Old Merle was a big buddy of his, and Bill Dyer. A lot of people still hanging with him. And and so they all came out, and so I think he just got J.R. Smith as a new manager. I think down in Coleman, Alabama, I believe, at
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah.
So anyway, you might know a few of those facts more than I do, probably, Andrew.
I know you've talked about it in, little snippets here and there of the A&E
Yeah.
biography and the CMT Giants thing. I'm glad y'all were there, and I'm glad they recognized y'all.
That was a fun thing we did down at Universal Studios there for Hank. And Hank didn't want to go to it. He thought, this is a goofy thing.
Yeah.
All these people get up and make a tribute. And Hank was so glad they did it,
Yeah.
Brad Paisley was there, Tim McGraw, Martina McBride did a neat thing when my dad and I went on stage, and we talked about the fall a little bit, and they showed a nice little clip. They did a really nice job. They filmed it live. They did do a little editing with it before they broadcast it, but it was actually filmed live at Universal Studios. But they did a nice job. Hank was really glad that he went and was a part of that. That was a neat show.
So, I know that you talked to him, and did he talk back to you at any point? I mean, I know you said he asked you about the snow.
He really didn't. He mumbled a lot of yes and no. That's about all he said. I was talking about what we were going to do that night when we got back to go fishing. What kind of gun works best for elk hunting? Does he hunt whitetail back in Tennessee? I mean, I was after 4 hours of scrambling as a little kid, you kind of run out of things to talk about. I didn't know much about politics at that age, and so you really run out of topics at that point. And so I was just trying to make up everything: football and basketball, who his favorite football player was. And so anyway, yeah, that's. But he would just kind of grunt and groan. And there was a time that I was on the mountain that Hank wasn't grunting and groaning anymore, and I honestly thought that he had died. I really did. And then about 10 minutes later, he kind of came back and he was kind of back in consciousness. And Hank told us later, he knew that while laying there that he didn't want to die in front of his best friend's 11-year-old son. So that's really what kept him going. And he says, as long as I can keep a little beat on the rock with my hand, he says, then I'm still alive. And so my dad honestly thought he was going to come back to a corpse, and he yelled way down below at me when he came back if Hank was still talking, and I said yes. And he said, my dad said that's the first time in 4 hours that he left me that he's actually thought we have a shot at maybe saving this guy's life, because he thought he'd come back and there'd be a dead Hank Williams Jr. sitting there. He really did.
God. So, I mean, what a day.
Oh, it was. It was. They did some, the Hank Living Proof story they did. It's kind of a neat biography of him. Unfortunately, they were going to film that on location, and that was during the Actors Guild strike. And so they had to film it, I think, in the Smoky Mountains. They used Richard Thomas. John Boy Walton played Hank. The little kid that played me was actually Christian Slater. Played me as an 11-year-old kid. Kind of interesting. It was his first gig as an actor. Was playing Walt Willey, which it's all gone downhill from then for him. But anyways, it was kind of funny. But anyway, they filmed it on location, or on Smoky Mountains. They had us rappelling off the mountain, and none of us ever knew how to rappel. I've never done that in my life. Even as a Boy Scout, I never did. So, they couldn't kind of replicate that fall down the mountain on a snowfield and tumbling down the hill. So, but they did the best they could, and it was and Richard Thomas actually did a pretty good job, playing Hank in the story. It's worth the watch. It's kind of worth the biography watch, and so
I saw that movie a long time ago.
Yeah, you can YouTube it. It's still out there on YouTube. Yeah.
The part that, it had him when he initially fell, he slipped down and grabbed the branch, and then the branch gave.
Yep, there was no branch to grab.
Yeah, that's what I was
reaching for everything he could at that point in real life. He was trying to dig his hands in the snow, and that didn't work. And by then, he'd run out of options, and he was clipping along pretty good like a human toboggan down there. And he saw those rocks and boulders coming up, and he knew the laws of physics weren't going to be in his favor. And when it hit, and his feet hit that first big boulder, it just stopped him, and he just flipped in the air. Oh, I wouldn't even guess how high in the air, and then he just kept tumbling down. If you ever seen the old footage of Evel Knievel when he crashed at Caesar's Palace and crashed, and he just rolls and rolls and rolls like a Raggedy Ann doll. That's what Hank looked like. I was like, how's a body just keep rolling and flipping down through the rocks? And every time he'd do a cartwheel, he'd land right on his head, and you could hear that sound of his bones hitting in the rock, and it was a sickening sound. I'll never forget it. And anyway, and some are up on Ajax for anybody looking for archaeological findings. Hank's sunglasses and cowboy hat are still on that mountain somewhere. So if somebody could go up there and find it, you're going to be able to YouTube it or get on eBay real quick and make some money, I think. So,
if I had the money to go out there and search and find that, there would be no eBay. I promise you.
Get a metal detector and find those glasses. Kind of interesting. So,
there wouldn't be
anyway.
There wouldn't be any putting it on eBay. I promise you that.
No, you'd keep that. It. Hank and my dad loved to shoot guns, and Hank and my dad both had pistols. They liked to target practice and stuff. And Hank still has a 44 Magnum that never. All the crashing he did down through the mountain, he never lost it out of his holster. Hank still has that gun with him. He's actually still has it, which is pretty neat to have that to have that pistol. And so anyway, but I've tried to talk Hank out of it. He said, "No, I think I'm going to hold on to this a little longer, Walt."
Anyway, that one's probably a little too close to home, isn't it?
That's a little too close to home. That gun, yeah. Yeah, that's about the only thing and his cowboy hat, he never did retrieve that cowboy hat either. So it's somewhere up on the mountain too. So,
when he was staying with y'all, when he was healing up, what was his mindset as far as songwriting? Because I know he thought for a while he wasn't ever going to do any of it again. He didn't want to be seen.
Well, he did come out with that Hank Williams and Friends, I believe, and so that was just on the, he just released that, and so I can't ever recall him writing any songs up there. Now, a year later, he came back. He remained Friends. Hank did a concert in Little Polson, that little town here on Flathead Lake that he recovered in. He did a little concert out at the fairgrounds, just kind of as his thanks to the community. For just everybody, the mailman that would come out and deliver groceries to my mom and all that sort of thing. And so it was a nice little thing that Hank had done. And he did some nice local TV and newspaper clips and some things. I still have a lot of that stuff tucked away. So he did a lot of that stuff too, but I can't ever recall him starting up and writing a new branch of songs. He did do an album later in the 80s called Montana Cafe, which is down in Hamilton. In fact, my dad's on the back cover of that album walking by on the street in his cowboy hat. And anyway, but a lot of that is saying about, like Montana Cafe was a true cafe in Hamilton, Montana. And if you listen to the words real good, and another song, All in Alabama, he talks about the fall on Ajax Mountain. And so you can hear the words to that song, and you hear that his life nearly ended climbing up old Ajax Mountain. I can remember a few of those lyrics. And so he wrote that song about the fall a little bit. So
that's one of my favorites.
Good stuff. Yep.
He also talked about in something, I don't remember, maybe it was the biography that A&E did a few years ago. He talked about when Merle Kilgore came out to see him and just was, very devastated to see. And I think he said that he went across the street to the bar and just got really drunk, and your dad had to go drag him out.
Yep. That was in the 80s. That was a little later on. That's when Hank was kind of at his prime. Yeah. He was winning. He won, I think, 5 Entertainer of the Year awards, CMAs, ACMs, and Hank was selling out shows just rolling. And he had a couple private jets, and he traveled a lot. His shows were going great. And everyone, whether for good or bad, there were a few guys out there that wanted a piece of him. And would think it was kind of cool to get in a bar fight with Hank Williams Jr. And there were a couple bad incidences that happened. And so, but Hank didn't take any crap from anybody. I'll say that about him. He it was what it was. He didn't sugarcoat anything. And that song, if you don't like Hank Williams, you can kiss my ass, because it's that mentality. If you don't like me, then be gone. I don't want you in my life. And so, Some of these people would take offense to him. I'd seen many times at restaurants, people would come up and shove a menu right in his face and want him to sign it or want his picture. After a while, Hank just got sick of it, and he'd
Yeah.
tell him, "Hey, can you meet me out of the restaurant afterwards, and I'll sign or get a picture with you?" And people took offense to that, and they're like, "Well, you asshole, Hank, you no good rot." And yeah, I mean, I'd get sick of it too.
Shit, yeah.
It's not all fun being a star. Sometimes he likes his private life. That's why he likes Montana so much. He likes getting his fishing rod and his gun and going elk hunting, and he doesn't like wine tipping and going to all those functions and Hollywood events. He hates them with a passion. He's a country boy. He really is.
Yeah. Do you think did he have his ranch out there before the mountain fall, or did he get that
No,
after?
he bought that from my dad, my grandfather's place. I'm fifth generation out there, and that was my grandfather's place he bought in the early 80s. And so that was kind of the beginning of when he really started getting cooking along pretty good with his. And he bought numerous ranches out there. He invested really good in cattle ranches in southwestern Montana. Over in the Bitterroot Valley, he had a couple places, a gun shop, and another farm. I think I added up once. At one time, Hank owned 9 homes in Montana here, 9 different houses and properties. And so he invested it wisely and just didn't, he had fun with his funds, but he invested it wisely too. He put it in good real estate and nice ranches and beautiful places that he can enjoy too.
Well, I know you talked about your overcoming your bout with cancer that I've known you've been going through for a few years now, and at times been really touchy. And we was talking earlier about how God might have put you on that mountain with Him to prepare you to face your own situation.
own adversity. I agree, and I think that's how the good Lord works in all of our. I believe in fate, big time. That we all come into perfect harmony with different friends and different situations in life for the right reason. My sister always talks about life that it's like a big gigantic puzzle, and we try to jam the pieces of the puzzle into it to make it fit. But you notice at the end of the whole thing, every piece of the puzzle fits perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand really quick that all of what's supposed to meant to be and fit perfectly in your life's puzzle.
Yeah.
And so
very true.
It was all meant to be. Yeah.
It sucks.
Very true.
And some of us suck. Some of us suck. You don't like how the puzzle turns out.
Yeah.
Like my situation with cancer. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring for me either. But hopefully it's prepared me a little bit with my own mortality and make me a little tougher. And I'm a pretty emotional guy, as you can tell. And mainly because all these things matter in my life. Friends and family.
That's all there is.
Yep. And the good Lord.
That's it. That's all there is.
Anyway. Yep. So anyway, I'm sorry for boo-booing so much on your show today.
Man, no.
I'm pretty emotional when I talked about these things. They've all been a big impact in my life. And it's almost full circle. And here I am faced with my own adversity.
Yeah.
And probably on that mountain myself, tapping the rocks.
Well, we are praying for you, Walt, and we thank you. I think I speak for every Hank Williams Jr. fan and myself when we say he would not have made it on that day 50 years ago if it hadn't been for you keeping him awake, keeping him alive.
Well, thank you much, and I appreciate it. Hope that we all had something to do with that. Hank's success and who he is today had something to do with all that.
Absolutely,
we appreciate Hank in our lives as well as he does. So
has he reached out to you or your dad in recent years?
No, not my dad. Hank, I text him on occasion. He's not coming out to Montana as much. He sold off a lot of his property. He's now remarried to a really nice lady. He's gone through some really tough family issues himself. His daughter was killed in a car accident, here 3-4 years ago, I guess. And then his wife, Mary Jane, just passed away just a year and a half ago or so. And so he's, like always, Hank's gone through a lot of ups and downs and a lot of other mountain falls down Ajax too in his life. And he's gone through a lot of adversity, that guy. He's tough. I can't imagine he's still chugging along and has a way of dealing with it. He's tougher than I am, so I hope I get a little of his toughness in my life too. So,
oh man, I mean, it's just the whole thing is amazing to me. And career wise, yeah, he probably would have never had the career that he had.
well, maybe not. Maybe that's what caused him to get a little tough and grit his teeth and fight through those times. I agree. I think we're all faced with those. We just got to realize that it's not a bad thing, that we take advantage of them and maybe make the best of our situation. That's the best way to look at it, I think.
Yeah.
And so,
well,
anyway,
man, I won't keep you anymore. But
no, you're fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and you got my number. If you're out in Montana, call and see us. We'll show you around Montana.
Man, I'd love it. I sure would love
Do that.
it. And again, Walt, we are praying for you. And
well, thank you.
Like he says, you can climb any old mountain once you make up your mind. And all in Alabama. It's part of the lyrics.
I agree.
mean,
well,
that's life.
Thank you so much, my friend. Let's stay in touch for sure.
All right, man. Thank you, Walt.
Take care.